is there a narrative in the DeSci world that you guys think is important to get out there? What is kind of like the promise, the vision? You know, if that makes sense. What is the narrative of DeSci?
Oh, I want to jump in, Jelani, but I'm going to give it back to you in just a sec. Right? I think this is really subjective because right now there is no narrative control. And that's for me, that's what DeSci and DeFi and crypto is all about, is just taking narrative control out of the picture. There is a narrative control in many aspects of the world right now. Science and academia has a narrative control. So if you were to say, what is the narrative of DeSci? If I sit here and say my narrative, which I have and will tell you, then and assume that that is the DeSci narrative, then that's a form of narrative control. So I think that well, I will tell you mine in a sec. I'll let Jelani go next, but I do think that the biggest thing that underlines all of it is that there is no narrative control. There are just multiple narratives that some people buy into and some people don't.
Do you want to give your narrative?
Okay, I'll
Or
give my narrative. Right, my narrative, my narrative is removing narrative control from these institutions, and I'm all power to the people, right? I'm distribution of resources, distribution of opportunity, not necessarily distribution of wealth. I think that that is quite misguided in many ways, but people should have access to the opportunities that everybody else does. Equality of opportunities is basically my narrative. When it comes to science, that extends really quite, you can see how that extends really far in terms of people with any mindset or any opinions on anything being able to do the science that they believe with equal opportunity. You can see how that opens the floodgates to new possibilities, right? But Jelani, who is
right,
established, I want to hear your narrative of what DeSci is.
right. So I I agree with Joshua. So the my personal narrative of DeSci is that it provides accessibility. So it's open access, open science in its truest form, or the mission is to make open science uh, be its most optimal form with this new tech stack. So making sure that anybody who has any form of science curiosity or science literacy or just wants to delve into learning more about scientific fields, whether it be biomedical or physical or astrophysics or what have you, psychology, has the opportunity to do so with minimal barriers. And this, is not this pertains to globally, right? So there are a lot of barriers that exist in the world: financial barriers, access point barriers, credential barriers. And what I think one thing that we like to touch upon, and that we didn't touch upon in the DAO description, is that DAOs, I think in their best form, are meritocracies. So if you have a certain skill set, even if let's say you're not a PhD like me, but you have some skill set that you brought onto yourself, you've done in research, you know how to run a PCR, just polymerase chain reaction. You have some skill that you've developed. Well, you can come to a DAO and you can put forth your capacity to do these things. And oftentimes, I've never seen it be refused. DAOs will accept you in and they'll slot you in where you can be useful, and you can get value out of that yourself. So it kind of breaks down this barrier of needing to be going to these high credential or these high affluent universities and institutions to be able to contribute to the scientific hive mind. Um, and so examples of that in the funding and other access is just giving access to science back to the individual and taking it out of the ivory tower. I think one beautiful way that Josh sometimes puts it is we're trying to not necessarily destroy the ivory tower, but bring that power structure down a notch such that other people and everybody else can have access to it. So again, the philosophy that I have for DeSci is accessibility and equity in the scientific realm. Are there narratives in the DeSci space? As Josh put it, there are. They're subjective. You'll find it in different spaces. DeSci right now is very heavily dominated by the biomedical sphere of science, so drug development and bio clinical trials, bio-relevant practices. But that's not all of what science is, right? There's physics, there's chemistry, there's psychology, there's all forms of science. And what we're hoping for is that these accessibility are going to bring more of these individuals into the space. And that will ultimately change the narrative over time. But I think overall, the narrative is accessibility. Now, whether that's being truly pushed forth by everybody to the same degree, that's here or there, right? There's always going to be agendas. There's always going to be personal um, perspectives in the space. But that kind of comes par for the course with humanity, right? If you're going to open it up to everybody, you're going to get people's input and it's going to bias. But how I view it, and I say it all the time, DeSci Web3 is a mosaic. And the more people we get in, the more that mosaic becomes even more mosaic. So you won't have these power concentrations as we have more people coming into the space.